the flu we had at the beginning of the year. Leaves a lingering cough sometimes.
Yeah, I had that last year when we came out of COVID, and then I kind of had a lingering cough for the next couple of months.
Well, we had a big family Christmas, and with all the kids.
Yep.
Yeah. More than just holiday cheer was spread this year. Yeah. Unfortunately, I mean, this completely ruined our New Year's Eve, New Year's Day plans, everything gone.
That's a real shame.
But we had fun with the kids. I got all the kids stuffed dinosaurs, just stuffed animals, but dinosaurs in their favorite dinosaur, and delivered them as Santa Claus with an inflatable T-Rex suit with a Santa hat duct tape on top.
That's amazing. I love that so much.
Mm-hmm.
Also, not the first time you have delivered dinosaurs as a gift to an entire group.
True. Yeah.
Because I have one myself on a shelf behind me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Everybody likes dinosaurs. Come on.
Dinosaurs are great. But that's a good kind of lead in, because I think you and I may have the strangest how did you become friends story of any person I know. Like, people have asked me so many times about how have I met Rachel. I'm like, it's boring. We were mutual friends. They're like, that's it? Yeah, that's it. Like, we were just literally mutual friends. You and me, on the other hand.
Yeah. Because I responded to a post on Nextdoor
that I had nothing to do with. I had no knowledge of the post.
Right. Yeah.
And then almost 6 years later, I would say on average, we talked for about 2 hours every week or two, consistently for almost 6 years.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane. But yeah, just man, Nextdoor is such a weird and often toxic place.
Yeah.
You really don't want to go down the rabbit hole in Nextdoor, but it was just like that one perfect moment when I just happened to be checking it, and I saw a post of people looking for D&D players. And, it just turns out that was them just right there, just practically down the street from me.
The backstory even behind that is the whole reason this D&D game exists almost had nothing to do with me. Like, a student came to me at school and wanted just a room to play it in. And I was like, I don't care. Just, you can come in here and play Dungeons and Dragons. I have no problem with that. And other teachers saw it, thought it looked like fun. One of the teachers was like, oh, my husband and his brother play. Let's see if they'll play a game for us. And so I showed up to that. And then like 2 weeks later, I couldn't go. And suddenly you were there. And then the next week we met. And I was just like, the Nextdoor post, I had no idea it even happened. They were just like, oh, we're going to try and find some more players. I thought in my head, oh, they have been playing for 20, 30 years. They know people. They'll just ask their friends. Nope. They just went to Nextdoor.
Right.
And it worked.
And it worked. And, I'd honestly never really played D&D much before.
Me neither.
I've done a few few one shots at cons and stuff like that. But, obviously I knew of D&D. And, just I wanted to try it on my own. I wanted to find people. And when this random Nextdoor post came up, sure, I'll go to a stranger's basement
with wallpaper that can be best described as,
oh god, the wallpaper.
Normal in the 70s, concerning in the 20 teens.
That jungle, not even jungle setting, just like
animal
wild
faces.
Animal prints of lions and zebras and giraffes and cheetahs
that look like they were drawn by hand with like markers. Colored in professionally, but the lines on them were pretty jagged. And all I know is it was weird at first. And it just, when you first saw it, you had to walk up to it and just stare at it. Like, I feel like every person who came in that basement did that. And then they took it down and I was sad. That's all I know.
Yes, I do miss it. Like, I wish they just, just put an empty frame on the wall somewhere. They could have painted everything else, but just leave a poster size of it still on the wall, but you can frame it.
Yeah.
I hope they've got a sample of that just tucked away somewhere.
I hope so.
Mhm.
It's pretty crazy to think that that's how it started, and now,
6 years
6 years later.
Yeah.
You are easily in the top 10 people I communicate with. But what's really interesting to me is outside of Dungeons and Dragons at the same time, we really haven't had too many conversations when we're not like actively playing or, sitting down for dinner before we play. Those times when I would come out to Georgia, and so we've kind of learned about each other through these small little pockets of conversations at the start.
It's 5 or 10 minutes before game starts.
Right.
And that's so, that 6-year relationship could just boil down to, that isn't at Dungeons and Dragons, could just boil down to a few hours.
Right, exactly. And it's like, oh, at that point, it's maybe just an acquaintance when I try to think about how much I actually know about Carter. But all these little pockets, there's constantly like you and me will stop and be like, wait a second. We both have this point of reference of some kind that's obscure. Right. That is not just, oh, it's because we're close in age, which even caught me off guard. I didn't realize we were that close in age. They're like really obscure because they're like Star Kid, online musical theater group.
Yes.
And we both are like, all right, stop everything. We need to have a quick conversation.
Yeah. That's a lot of what we do. Just some little thing comes up. It's like, okay, hang on. We got to address this. We got to we both are really into this thing. So we have to stop the conversation just for a moment.
We're both really into this thing that even all of my friends who I've known my whole life, or like friends who I spend more time with, don't know about or care about. It's super, super kind of obscure, but it's wonderful and it makes me happy.
And so many of these things that you kind of had to get it like at the right time.
Right.
So it's hard. You can't just introduce somebody to this thing that's, there's this Harry Potter musical that's like 15 years old now.
And it was recorded very amateurish.
Yeah. Recorded, a little camcorder in the back of a black box theater in,
Michigan.
Chicago, in a Michigan university. The people who know it absolutely love it and are obsessed with it. And I found out about it in college with my Harry Potter friends. And of course, my theater friends and musical theater. And that was part of the reason we loved it. It was, these theater students doing their own thing.
Yeah.
So we really admired it for that.
And getting cease and desist letters from J.K. Rowling, like, how much better can life get? You know what I mean?
I mean, back then, that was something to be proud of.
Yeah, that's true. Now, not so much. Never linger on your heroes too long.
There you go.
So with that, I think that's a great place to kind of jump into this kind of theme that, we've talked about a few times with kind of your past and your history with, Dungeons and Dragons, which leads into role play, and then cosplay, theater, production, kind of just creating in general. And then these more recent adventures and creation of where you've been going out in the world and on these camping trips and stuff. So I kind of wanted to start further back with the parts where I didn't really know you. So you were in theater at a younger age. Is that correct?
I got into theater in high school.
In high school. Okay.
Yes. So I actually kind of came into it late.
I was in theater in middle school.
Right. Compared to a lot of, theater kids, I came very late. I feel like earlier on, I didn't really, have something I was a part of. But, going back early on, I've always been a builder. I've always been a maker.
Yeah.
Love to build things, love doing various costumes and crafts and stuff like this. And on a whim in high school, I took an elective for technical theater.
Amazing.
And I absolutely fell in love with it.
Yeah, that's what I primarily did. I went into it in hopes of acting, but I'm not great at that. But the technical side, I did lighting.
See, I went in with set and prop building. That was my main focus originally, and man, I went in hard to the point. This was my junior year of high school, and by the time senior year came around, I mean, I just completely rewritten my life at that point. Hell, by that point, I became the student technical director of my high school. It was a huge thing and a huge part of my life. And that even influenced me going into college.
Where did you go to college?
Georgia Southern University.
Georgia Southern. I knew you went in Georgia, but having not grown up in Georgia, I'm always like, okay, did they say Georgia Southern? Did they say Georgia State? And then it's like, in my head, I have to like work through the layers of it all.
Well, it's even more confusing when a lot of people just say GSU.
Yes.
Okay, well, GSU, that could be Georgia State University or Georgia Southern University. Yeah, so, exactly. I was Georgia Southern. Yeah. And part of that is because, looking for colleges, and I mean, I wanted to do theater at that point, and visiting there, they had a great theater program.
Were you always behind the scenes, or did you ever go on stage?
I occasionally went on stage. I mean, well, to be honest, for one thing, if you're going to be a theater major, there were certain requirements. You had to have a role every once in a while. Yeah. Small things. And, most of it was when there was just a really fun show that would be fun to be in. I was also really into, medieval stuff. So one time when we did a play about Joan of Arc, well, that was one that I actually went out for an audition for, and I got a part in. Nice. I also did sets and costumes and stuff for that as well. But I actually did get up on stage for that one too.
You're telling me you're trying to convince me that there was a Joan of Arc play, and you were going to be sure that you were making the costumes. The person I know who has made their own chainmail. And yeah, of course. I would have only assumed they couldn't have kept you away.
I actually had a lot of pieces of chainmail I had made because also being into medieval stuff, and I got into the SCA down there in college.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So that was my first foray into reenactment as well, and we'll talk more about that as well. But I had a bunch of like bits and pieces of chainmail, so it was kind of like, look, I'm going to insist, costume department, no sweater mail. Right, I've got the pieces. Just put them in this. I don't care about the other, but like if they're gonna be in armor, they're gonna wear some real stuff.
That's awesome. I had no clue that you were doing reenactments too.
So yeah, there was an active SCA group down in Statesboro that I got into as well. I didn't do a lot with them. It was, fighter practice every couple of weeks. I went to one or two events, but I was also just so busy with school and everything else.
Now, kind of for me and also others, SCA is Society for Creative
Anachronism.
That's right. Yeah.
So medieval reenactment.
Yep.
I would say it might be a little less accurate than many other reenactment societies, but with that, it makes it a lot more accessible. One thing you have to understand in reenactment societies, in the various ones, there's a bit of a hierarchy of reenactment societies and how they view each other. Right. There are the what do you call, like the HEMA, the historical European martial arts. There are dozens of various groups that do this, and so extremely accurate in their gear, their fighting. They're using real swords and stuff. They may be blunted,
Right.
going out in all out war in full steel armor and steel swords and everything like that.
And they probably got it like down to almost the decade of advancement that they pick and choose.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's kind of seen as a top tier level. SCA, I always saw it as more of a mid tier. We're going out, we're fighting with wooden weapons.
Yeah.
Your sword is made out of rattan. There are a lot of people who, when you first get started out and get your first set of armor, it's plastic.
Yeah.
Pickle barrels that have been cut up into a coat of plates and just covered with some fabric.
Yeah.
And then working down on those various tiers, SCA very much like to look down on the LARPers.
Yeah, I was going to say the next level down is LARP.
The next level down is you got the LARP with foam weapons and
hockey pads.
Right. Nobody's getting hurt.
Yeah. Except for their feelings.
Right. So yeah, that was kind of my first foray into reenactment.
That's awesome. That's so cool. And like all of a sudden, I'm seeing all these different dots starting to connect, and looking back, it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that also makes sense.
Yeah.
So, how old were you when you were doing the reenactment? Was that still in college, or was that kind of after?
No, that was still in college.
So then there's probably about a 4-5 year gap before we meet at that point.
Oh no, longer than that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because we would have met around 2016. Yeah, 2016, maybe 2017.
It may have been very early 2017. Yeah.
Right. So I graduated in 2010.
Okay. 7-year jump. So what were you kind of doing in between that time? Did you continue working with like local theater productions or?
Yeah. So in college, I'm doing mostly theater. But I also got into some other areas. I got into art and jewelry design, specifically metalworking, sculpture. Right. And part of the reason my college took a little longer is I didn't actually get a degree in theater.
Okay.
And I'll admit, one of the big things was the foreign language requirement for that. I am no good with foreign language.
Oh yeah.
Ended up having to shift my degree around, and I got a little burnt out on theater for a bit, and went more towards art, and I got into jewelry and metalsmithing.
Yeah.
And then ultimately, I course corrected back to theater, and I got to the point like, okay, I can't leave theater for jewelry, and I can't leave jewelry for theater.
Yeah.
And I had a great counselor that helped me figure out a Bachelor of General Studies degree.
Okay. Just kind of taking what you already had on hand and working into that. Okay. Nice.
And it's a tricky one. A lot of people don't know about it. Your typical degree is where you have a major and a minor. The Bachelor of General Studies breaks that up into 3 concentrations, and each concentration is about like a minor and a half.
Okay.
As far as number of credits go, and you come up with 3 of those. So I did one concentration in theater, the other in jewelry and metalsmithing, and to throw a little more career, marketable career stuff on there, marketing and IT.
Okay. And that feeds into everything else.
Yeah.
Yeah. That feeds into your workforce experience.
So that was ultimately what allowed me to graduate college.
That's awesome. I like looking back, if I knew a degree like that existed, which is easily my biggest complaint about college in general is just the things you learn about when you're either almost done and your other friends or people you meet are like, oh yeah, I did all these things. You're like, where was that option available?
Right.
Or people you meet later in life are like, yeah, I got a degree in this. You're like, you can get a degree in that.
Yeah. This was a build your own degree. It was a mix and match. It was perfect.
That's amazing.
You can do this with literally any 3 concentrations. If you're like me and you can't, or you don't want to just focus on one,
which I am,
thing, I broaden your horizons. Do multiples, and you get to build that degree at how you see fit in a way.
And honestly, having a degree like that, I think, is far more useful in the real world, because all a degree really does is open doors for you.
Absolutely.
I don't know how many like jobs I've seen in my life where the requirement is simply a bachelor's degree.
Mm-hmm.
They have no field listed. They just want you to have a degree, because it just means you're educated and you have skills, and those skills have been put to test by an organization that's not a public school K through 12.
Yeah.
That's all it means.
And that general says it's basically a bachelor's jack of all trades.
Yeah. Which is something that I think I would have found incredibly useful, because I started as a biochem major with plans to go into pharmacy. I was pre-pharmacy, and then I now know incredibly ADHD, and was struggling in certain classes and struggling with like getting to class on time for especially labs. Labs were the hardest, because if you weren't there right at the start, you're not coming in, right? Which is so different from other classes where you could be a minute or two late. And then I also worked in a pharmacy and just lost all interest in it, because every pharmacist I knew, sure, it's good money, but they all had health problems and were all on had anxiety and stress problems, because it's you're 14 hours a day on your feet, no lunch breaks, and a single mistake and you could kill somebody. It is not a very easygoing, low stress position. And I was like, that just doesn't seem interesting to me. So I'm losing interest in the career path, struggling with the classes, and just kind of started losing interest in the major, even though there's so much you could do with a biochem major. And then when I started looking at what do I want to do next, and I looked at my interest, it was like, well, I love history, I love writing, I love storytelling, I love teaching, and I love computers. What do I do? And I was like, I guess history education is calling to me, just based off the classes I'd already taken and seemed the most interesting to me, and kind of combined most of those things in some way. And now, not 10 years later, I've been working in audio video for 2 years, and I'm not even using it per se. If I knew at the time of general studies, I absolutely would have kind of scattered it all. I would have done a bit with education. I would have done a bit with computers. I may have stayed in science to some extent, because I probably, had some of the credits I already needed towards it.
I mean, honestly, there are probably people out there who have been going down one path for a certain degree, and maybe they want to completely change. They want to leave, not do anything else. Well, they may already have all the credits they need for one concentration. Now you just got to come up with 2 more and you're done.
Yeah. Or even if you switched majors once in there, you already have 2 of them, and you're like, oh, I could already work towards something new and just end up graduating. And honestly, having those varied skill sets, the reason why I'm in AV now is because I went into education, and it was like, oh, you are good at teaching, you are good at history and storytelling. You're also really good with technology, which most people in education aren't. They're better now, but even the pandemic really kind of forced that on most people I know.
Oh, absolutely.
And being able to I can teach students, I can teach adults, and I know how to use technology. I can teach them how to use technology. It's suddenly, I was practically dragged out of the classroom by administrators, because they're like, this is what we need you to do. And so that's what sent me down, that path to now do audio video for a school district. But man, it would have been really nice to dabble in it a little bit, because now when I look back at certifications, I'm like, God, I wish I could have just done this 10 years ago and not have to pay the prices now without the tuition help for certification tests. Oh man,
Absolutely.
it's a nightmare. That's great. I love that.
So after college, or I guess rather right at the end of college, the summer before I graduated, I was taking summer courses to catch up, to fill in some things. The theater department did study abroad in London, and I did not go.
Oh. What was there? You don't have to get into it if you want to, but I was just curious, like, if was there like a specific reason for it, or it just something that just kind of like
it was part of it was cost, and also having to be, there on campus to do those summer classes that I'm trying to do to finish and get out.
Yeah.
So I decided, since I didn't get to go with them, I would do it myself.
Oh, okay.
And after I graduated, I got a job in London.
That's awesome. I had no clue.
Yeah. I sent my resume to every theater I could possibly find in London, looking for a summer internship. And I finally got one.
Yeah.
It was with Opera Holland Park in West London as an unpaid intern for the summer.
You moved to London for an unpaid internship.
Yep.
That's awesome.
And
I respect it.
Then I went back 2 more summers as a paid employee.
Fantastic.
So Opera Holland Park is an open air theater, and they only operate during the summer, where they set up a giant tent and do opera. I mean, it is legitimately, it's been named one of the best opera companies in the country.
That's awesome, though. I had no clue that. So you went back there for a few years working for this theater company. Was it still just set production and all of that, or?
Yeah, I mean, it was working backstage on every single show. This is, they kind of ran it as a company where just like we hire up everybody we need for the season, and you get a different role or part on each show. And just everybody's there, working together every day for like 3 months. And it's a massive production that they do every single year.
Wow.
Yeah, but yeah, I'd spend 3-4 months in the summer doing sets and props and working backstage for the actual shows. And we even got to do a little traveling with it, as we'd take a small show to a festival nearby and stuff like that. Oh, it was an amazing experience.
That's incredible. Have you been back since you stopped working at all?
Yes. My wife and I went to London for our honeymoon.
Oh, fantastic.
And we actually planned it and did it in the summer so I could go back and take her to a show.
That's wonderful.
At Opera Holland Park. Yeah.
Oh, that's so good. How long after that after London, do you meet your wife?
I met her before the last trip to London.
Okay.
I met her. We started dating in November, and in April, I went to my last summer in London. So we'd been dating a few months when I did one more summer in London. And that was rough. Yeah. I'll say. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I can imagine. That also would explain why you didn't go back the next summer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was definitely part of it.
Yeah.
And part of it was just, it was hard to, even if she was not a factor, and she was definitely a factor in my decision. It was hard to, when I was back here in Atlanta, I was living with my parents and just taking small jobs, at a small theater for one show here or there, and then to uproot everything to try to go over there for 3 or 4 months at a time, it made it hard to establish roots back in Atlanta professionally.
Yeah. And I mean, and also like that is such a huge commitment, I may have mentioned before, but Rachel did summer camp, fine arts summer camp, Blue Lake, in Michigan every summer when she was kind of in college, and she'd go up there. She was a camp counselor and worked the program and run it, and went for multiple years. And even just going from Atlanta to Michigan in the summer.
Oh, yeah.
So many things had to be arranged. Our school semester ends at a time that is different from their school semesters. So their summer camp start at a different time than the ones in Georgia. So it's like, okay, who do I work out with at like campuses of when I need to have things done early or need to go out there and like cut off, like rearrange with work of, hey, I'm going away for 3 months. I know you can't schedule me. When I come back in 3 months, will I still have a job?
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's like, there's so much to set up and arrange. And while she loved it and was great at it, and it really fed into, her now being an orchestra director and, a huge part of that industry. I mean, all industries, but really when, music is networking, because you're usually the only one on your campus in that area. You have to have people outside of your organization. And so like it was a huge benefit, but at a certain point she just kind of hit a wall where it was, I can't really keep doing this even if I want to. So I can't even imagine taking that and extrapolating it out to a foreign country, let alone one across an ocean.
Where then you also have to consider the visa issues as well. Basically, anyone hiring me full time would have to prove that they couldn't find somebody in the UK to do my job. And come on, man, I'm a few years out of college.
Yeah.
It's trying to prove that I am the only person in the world that can do this thing. No, I wasn't.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, ultimately I there was a strong point in my life when I tried hard. I wanted to move to London full time. I wanted to immigrate over there and just that be my life. And that just didn't end up working out that way. You know?
See, what I did was when I went to Ecuador, I took her with me.
Oh yeah.
And so we fell in love with the place together, and then legitimately considered staying. We were offered jobs at the school we were working at for long-term positions. They actually wanted us to move out and to Guayaquil, which is the largest city in Ecuador. It's out on the coast. We were living in Quito, and they were like, hey, we're starting up a new campus out there, and we want y'all to help build the entire program as it's going out. And we were like, that sounds amazing. We would love to do that. And they're like, yeah, we're starting with like third graders. And we were both like, oh no, that is not. She's wanting to teach high school. I just student taught seniors and like juniors. And I'm just like, I don't want to go to 9-year-olds. Like that is not.
Yeah.
And so you just have to like, it's an opportunity of a thing we would love to do. And we really, really considered it. I mean, even the dean of the school flew out to Atlanta after we had come back home to like meet with us again and really talk about like the logistics of it all. Like we were that close to just like, yeah, we graduated college and we are moving to Guayaquil, Ecuador, and starting our life there. But it just didn't line up properly. Where if they offered it at the school we were at in Quito, I 100% think we would have taken it. Yeah.
I'll admit we occasionally see stuff with some little town in Ireland or New Zealand. It's like we just have no people, so we're literally just gonna bring in anybody and we'll pay you to just move to this. And move into this little country town. That's always in the back of our mind.
Yeah.
When things are going rough here in the States.
Yeah. We talk about it too, and but now Rachel's also at like a top 20 school in the country, so she's like, I don't know, I kind of like it here.
Yeah, that's fair. I was just gonna say, hey, you can still run D&D from Ecuador.
I can. The internet speeds up there down there. We were getting, especially in the city. I mean, a city in any country in the world is still a city. The infrastructure is there. We lived very comfortably in Quito, very comfortably. So it was, we would be fine, but we absolutely could. So back to you. London, you've met Catherine, which I believe, didn't y'all meet at a con?
We met at a con here back in the States.
Yeah.
So we met at AWA, which is Anime Weekend Atlanta.
Okay.
And
we're all just a bunch of nerds.
I know. Yeah. But I should back up. That kind of leads into my real start in nerddom, in geekdom.
Mm-hmm.
Right after my first summer in London. I'm out of college. I'm back home, back here in Atlanta, living with my parents. And my parents say, hey, we saw this thing on PBS, a special about Dragon Con. And that looks like something you'd be interested in.
Yep, it would. It absolutely would.
Somehow, despite being an Atlanta native,
mm-hmm.
I had never really heard of Dragon Con before.
In your defense, though, Dragon Con in the last decade has become so much larger than it ever was.
And some of this, you might attest to the PBS special 4 Days at Dragon Con, which
that's a good point.
Which actually kind of brought it out to the public a little bit more. And that was how I found it. They had recorded it on the DVR and showed it to me and said, hey, this is coming up in a week.
Oh my God.
You should go.
You can't go to Dragon Con in a week nowadays.
No.
Like, it sells out the weekend after the last one ended.
Absolutely. Yeah. So this was back in 2010.
Okay.
And well, that special focused a lot on the cosplayers, the costumes.
Did they do the big parade back then too?
Yep.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Cosplay parade.
Because this special has focused entirely on costuming, I have to go in costume.
Right. That's
so I have
requirement.
I have a week to put together my costume. Thanks to one of the costumes they featured, Steampunk Boba Fett, John Strangeway, great guy. I now know him.
Yeah.
But I first saw him on TV. It's like, okay, well, like mashup costumes are a thing. So I had a Batman suit and I had medieval armor. Well, it's the Dark Knight.
Yeah, I mean, it's there in the name.
And I threw that together, the first version of that costume, in a week and went to my very first convention.
And you showed up and realized that like half the people aren't in costume.
Yeah. Yeah, you definitely don't have to be in costume.
No. Did you walk in the parade that first time?
I did.
Awesome.
Because back then you could literally get your ticket and sign up for the parade right then and there.
What a wild time.
Yeah. Nowadays you have to sign up for the parade months in advance.
Oh yeah.
But I showed up to my first Dragon Con at like 7 a.m. on Saturday. in costume, walking around downtown Atlanta, and there's nobody. It is absolutely dead. And I am the one weirdo in a costume, and I am freaking out. Like, I walk into the hotel, I asked the staff, like, where do you get tickets? And they didn't know. Like, what? It was a big learning curve. My very first Dragon Con, and I'm completely alone there. No, I didn't go with anybody. But man, I met so many people. I had so much fun. And over the next few years, I continued going to cons as medieval Batman.
Yeah. Because once you've got a costume, set, you pretty much, like, all the people I know who go in costume, they may have a couple, but they'll they have like their go-to, like, what's my quick grab I've got, and I'll just make small improvements on it over the years.
Right.
That's awesome. And so then you end up going to other conventions, and you go to the anime convention. You weren't Dark Knight, like, y'all met. Didn't y'all have did y'all have similar costumes, or did you just happen to
completely different?
Okay.
So when we actually met, the costume I was in, I made a companion cube from the game Portal.
Yep.
Yes. And that companion cube went over my head.
Yep. It was
it
was over your head.
Mean it was like sitting on top of my head like a hat. I mean, it was my head, and it's like an 20-inch cube that completely covered, shoulders up. And I met her at the bar. She was dressed as a steampunk Valkyrie. And awesome. I'd also
awesome.
I'd been getting into steampunk stuff, and I knew, like, okay, Valkyrie, Norse mythology, and this is all stuff I'm really interested in.
Yeah.
A few months later, we saw each other at another event. It was the Mechanical Masquerade, a just steampunk party night.
Dude, that is so cool. I know that this is so dumb and nerdy, but, like, those types of things, those are the things, like, even cosplay and all of that. I've been to a few conventions and stuff. I always love them. I don't have the attention span nor the confidence to do any of these things, let alone a full masquerade. But, like, from the outside, I hear about it, I'm like, that is amazing, and I wish I had the confidence to go to one, because I'm sure it is an absolute blast.
Oh yeah, it was great. But I mean, this was the Mechanical Masquerade. It was just the Atlanta steampunk crowd.
Yeah.
And at the time, steampunk was very big, and there was quite a robust group in Atlanta that I got involved in by going to Enacrocon, which was one of the many steampunk conventions.
Yeah.
But this Mechanical Masquerade, she was there, and we ended up. She actually had a date that night, but we ended up spending all of our time together. I had no idea that's how little her date was paying attention to her.
Yeah.
But I kept running into her, just circling back to her, hanging out with her throughout the night.
Yeah.
And the next day, she asked me out.
Look, see, your How Did You Meet Your Wife story is so interesting. Like, that's supposed to be the interesting stories, That's great. That's so good.
Yeah, apparently the next day she was hanging out with some people who and somebody had tickets to the Shakespeare Tavern. But they couldn't go, so I asked, who wants some free tickets, and she's thinking, oh yeah, this is the guy was hanging out with. He's into theater and Shakespeare and stuff. I bet he'd like to go. So she asked me if I'd come, and I spent the whole night wondering, is this a date? And she spent the whole night wondering, does he know this is a date? And that was over 10 years ago now. Yeah.
Well, congratulations from 10 years ago. Still going strong. And y'all's just creative endeavors continue. So, then we start playing D&D. We go through all of that. Then there are these hints that you give kind of throughout. Like I start picking up on cosplay. I see, your pictures on Facebook of them. I start picking up, you're doing metalworking, a little bit of jewelry work as well. And then something happens probably about a year ago that kind of changes all of that, which is you're suddenly not doing so much metalwork as like textiles, leatherwork. You're going camping. You've got crossbows. And so like, where did this whole I'm going to go on a ranger expedition, if you will, kind of start?
Well, when I was younger, I was in Boy Scouts and used to do a lot of camping and hiking and just a lot of outdoor activities, and worked at summer camps, and I've realized I've been indoors for far too long.
Yes.
Lately. So I have been having this drive to get outside. And so part of it, a year ago, I took up hunting.
Yep.
Which is a bit of an odd thing. Like, people like, wait, you're a hunter now? You didn't grow up at hunting or anything like that. I've kind of picked that up on my own. I went on a company hunting trip.
Yeah.
And I didn't get anything, so I decided, well, screw it, I'm going to do it on my own. Kind of similar to the London trip. Like, I didn't get to go to study abroad. Well, screw it, I'm going to do it on my own.
Yeah.
After I've been doing this for a little while, and I'll admit I still haven't even gotten a deer yet.
Yeah.
This is my second season hunting. I haven't gotten anything. I want some venison. That's why I'm doing that.
But also what you've got though is what you want in the first place, right? A reason to get outside.
Yeah.
But yeah, something was missing.
But something was missing. It's just, I don't identify much with modern hunters. There are, of course, many wrong connotations about it being, redneck, hillbilly, hunter, things like that. Sure, there are some like that, but it's, this is an activity that can be for everybody, but I still want to do my own thing with it. And then I had this idea, going back to D&D, of particularly the rations. Well, I've yet to mention this tonight, but my wife has a geeky food blog.
She does. She has a show, more than a blog. She live streams her recipes and everything.
Yes. So that is The Gluttonous Geek. thegluttonousgeek.com.
I will be sure to put a link in here, as well as I'll also throw out there Munchies and Minis is the name of the show on YouTube and Twitch, because that's a little bit easier for some people to spell than gluttonous.
Yes. It's gluttonous, not glutinous.
Yeah.
It's got nothing to do with gluten or celiac. A lot of people make that mistake. No, it's The Gluttonous Geek. Indulge in your fandoms.
Wonderful.
So with this, she makes recipes inspired by movies and video games and books and tabletop, doing D&D recipes. And I wanted to try some of that. So my initial thought was, well, let's make some of that and let's actually try it out. And no, I'm not just going to make it up in the kitchen and try a piece of hardtack,
Right.
or I'm not just going to go, cook something on the fire pit in the backyard. No, I'm going to be absolutely insane. And I am going to put together a full kit of garb and gear and actually go hike out into the woods and try this for real to the extent that I can.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. I started putting together pieces of medieval inspired clothing, and I found, and I've gone for ranger gear.
Yeah.
So, I've got like cloaks and tunics and tons of little leather pouches and knives and axes on my belt, and a pack with a canvas tarp and bedroll. And I'm trying to do this camping out, but with primitive gear that one might find with a D&D adventurer.
Yeah.
And that's how the idea started. And like any great idea that it seems I have, man, this is so great, so original. Nobody's doing this. And then I go online and damn it, there's hundreds of people doing this.
I know the pain. I know the pain so much.
And specifically, I found a group that is the Middle Earth Reenactment Society, Middle Earth Rangers.
Awesome.
So yeah, I started more towards D&D, but then I found this group which provided more of a template. And let's face it, I love Middle Earth.
Yeah.
I love Tolkien. I love Middle Earth.
It works. It fits.
So I probably know more about that than I do about, the D&D setting.
I thought you were going to say than real history.
It's a toss up there. Yeah. But the works of Tolkien have always been just near and dear to my heart. Heck, one tradition that we have here in my family is New Year's Day. Every year is our annual Lord of the Rings marathon.
Yeah.
Where we invite over a bunch of people and have, second breakfast, 11sies, luncheon, dinner, supper, afternoon tea, everything. Yeah. And just watch the extended version of Lord of the Rings. And there's actually the reason I do that every year on New Year's Day is to keep myself from just putting those movies on repeat.
It is a good idea to just have a tradition of like, hey, we don't need to watch this in November and December because we're gonna watch it with everybody.
Right,
coming up soon.
It makes it special because I literally I have done that in the past. Like back in college, I
did the same thing, not with Lord of the Rings, but just kind of like all movies in general. Yeah, it's just constant.
But yeah, I put together all this gear, all the garb for my ranger trek.
Mm-hmm.
And I took time off work and I set aside, I planned out a route and set aside multiple days, got out there, and I about died.
Yeah, I was about to say, and in the beginning, you initially set out how many days and your plan was to travel how far?
My plan was about like 12 miles.
Yeah.
I want to say over 5 days.
Yeah.
And I ended up doing in total about 3 miles and 3 days.
Yeah. Which with everything you had, which was very little, and considering how heavy your pack was, I remember you saying like you learned a lot about the importance and realities of encumbrance
Absolutely. Yes. I was in the distant past very used to backpacking.
Yeah.
And backpacking is not like riding a bicycle.
No.
You
No.
can't just pick it up after a decade and expect to get back out in the mountains.
There was a specific set of muscles in your back that you don't realize are used for carrying, and a very different specific set that's used for, say, just picking things up randomly or sitting in chairs all day. They're all very different muscles.
It's very different. Not only that, there's a big difference between what you see as the fantasy pack and a modern backpack, and that is specifically the hip belt and frame, which help transfer that weight.
Which is why we use modern backpacks.
Yes. So I ended up with a very heavy pack with not proper support. And I learned just how out of shape I truly am.
Yeah.
So this trip, I planned this big round trip, and I got there. It's early morning. This is mid-October. It's early morning. There's fog everywhere. I didn't see the sun for 2 days, and I drive out to the trailhead, put on my gear, and I start hiking uphill. And I made it about a mile and a half before I was just dead.
Yeah.
So I stopped and I made camp, and part of it was, it was wet and miserable. I was living in a cloud. Like I said, it was foggy. I couldn't see more than 100 yards. And just dense forest, North Georgia mountains. But I ended up making camp that first day. I spent so much time trying to get firewood and trying to get fire going. And I did. But you don't realize how much goes into processing firewood when it's all wet.
Yeah.
I have to cut logs and split them. You can't just pick up sticks off the ground. I got to split dead wood that has been off the ground in order to get the dry stuff in the center of it. And I'm also using primitive methods for this kind of stuff. It took quite a while.
Yeah.
And to keep that fed, I had to cut so much firewood.
Yeah. It's like just to get the fire going required so much energy. And then I'm also, I don't have a tent with me. I'm dressed in, not water wicking fabrics.
Right.
They're all wet.
I'm dressed in linen and wool, tunic, trousers, cloak, leather, medieval boots.
Yeah.
And my shelter is a canvas tarp. And I don't have a sleeping bag. I have a canvas bedroll with a waxed canvas bedroll with wool blankets, with a wool blanket in it. And then I have my cloak that I can also wrap around me and stuff.
Yeah.
But I made it out and made dinner that first night. And part of this was, the various recipes and things I wanted to try. My first meal was rabbit stew. So I didn't actually hunt the rabbit. I did make that one concession.
Yeah.
That, I'm not going to be while I had a bow and arrow with me, at the time it was not rabbit season.
Yeah.
It was small game and deer season, just not rabbit season.
Yeah.
I should also say the area I was hiking, it was legal for me to hunt. It was public land that was legal for me to hunt. I just didn't get the opportunity to.
Yeah.
But we bought a rabbit from the grocery store, and I had it frozen and carried it with me. And by the time that first night rolls around and I'm cooking, it's thawed out.
Right.
But it leaves me cutting up vegetables in the forest and butchering this rabbit on a log a little ways off away from my camp.
Yeah.
And it was great. It was a really good stew. It turned out excellent.
I bet after that long day too, it was, there's a different type of enjoyment from days like that.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
But still, it was a cold night.
Mm-hmm.
And I decided I was going to stay in that campsite for the next day.
Yeah.
Or rather, not move my camp.
Right.
So I get up in the morning, I get my fire going, I reheat the rabbit stew for breakfast. It was cold enough that night, I didn't have to worry about refrigeration.
Yeah.
I ended up just hanging the pot up in a tree to keep it away from any critters. And then I did a day hike. Because further down the trail, there was an offshoot trail that went to the top of a waterfall. And I needed to get water anyway.
Right.
So, I put on minimal gear and ended up doing about 4 miles that day to go to the waterfall and back. And it was some rough up and downhill to get there. But honestly, that waterfall trip kind of made it worth it. I've got some great pictures and videos of me standing on the edge of the cliff, looking out over the mountains, with my cloak just blowing in the breeze, that kind of stuff. So that was the highlight of the trip, but it almost ended in disaster.
Yeah.
It took me so long to get there and back. I underestimated the distance.
Yeah.
I underestimated my speed. That I actually got back to base camp after dark.
Wow.
Yeah. Took me but just like 8 hours.
Yeah.
Out and back through the day. I was actually in a potentially dangerous situation of being away from camp at night, and even made the really stupid mistake of trying to take a shortcut. And
yeah,
man,
not the greatest call in the wild.
No, don't do that. I mean, look, I knew where I was on the trail.
Yeah. Which was at least you had the fallback of there are multiple trails around.
Right. There are trails. There are very well established trails. I knew where I was at all times.
Yeah.
I could pinpoint myself on a map. I also had cell phone, GPS, things like that. Yep. But even with the paper map, I knew exactly where I was. Map reading is a very important skill.
Yes, it is.
Always carry that paper map and compass with you. But I made the mistake of judging, well, there's a gap between two trails. And I bet that there's a little shortcut here. I can take 30 minutes off my walk back to camp, and the sun is setting fast.
No.
Well, mostly I just got into there and you immediately get turned a bit because there's just too much underbrush.
Yeah. There's a reason why there aren't trails through there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I got into it. I got into the thick brush and just realized, like, no, I'm not going to be able to go any further here. But I know absolutely I can turn northwest here and I'll pick the trail back up.
Yeah.
And within a few minutes, yep, there it is. I just had, I thankfully had the wherewithal to make that decision before it got dark.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I picked the trail back up, if it had been dark, I probably would have walked right past that trail.
Yeah.
But I ended up getting there and just, followed the trail through back to base camp through the very end, the last light, as long as I absolutely could.
Mm-hmm.
And I still came up short of getting there with any sort of light.
Yeah.
Thankfully, because of some recognizable landmarks,
mm-hmm.
I know like, okay, this is absolutely pitch black, dead. There's no light, no natural light left, but I am 5 minutes from my camp.
Yeah.
I can pull out my cell phone. I can, use some artificial light here and make it back. And I did just fine. But there was a little moment where I'm thinking like, I might have to hunker down and wrap myself up in a cloak here under a tree and just try to shiver and stay warm through the night.
Yeah.
That's not a spot you want to be in.
No, it's not. It's not. But I mean, you made it back. The good news was that you were, when you were out there, because you have, some experience with it and kind of knowledge going in, you were heads up and aware the whole time, looking for those landmarks and making sure you knew where you're at and having the maps and also having a modern tool on you just in case.
Yep.
You weren't going out there and saying, leave the cell phone behind. We don't need this. I'm going out into the true forest. I'm not just going into the mountains of places with trails and established maps. Like you were doing it in a smart way. Still dangerous. There's definitely no doubt about that. But a smarter way of doing it. And I mean, I'm still impressed at even how much land you covered and what you accomplished with the cooking. I mean, the pictures are also, wonderful and a great mark of it all from even the outside. But it's just, I am very interested and intrigued to see your next attempt.
Well, eventually I will have, I did take a lot of video and stuff. And eventually I'm going to put up a video on my wife's Gluttonous Geek channel on YouTube of the experience.
Yeah.
And yeah, this is a first go that just makes me want to get back out and do more.
That's awesome. And it really is like the culmination of all these things of just like the costume building, the reenactments, the love of just general nerd stuff, kind of the cosplay, the even your wife's, cooking, like you even brought that into it. And it is again, another one of those things where I hear you talk about it and I am so utterly impressed by it. And it is so cool. And I just know I would never have the wherewithal and the courage to try it. And it's just even like you're sitting here, like, man, I didn't go nearly as far, overestimated all. I'm a little disappointed in all of that, but it's still just so impressive. It's awesome.
Well, I mean, I put a lot of work and effort into planning and putting together gear. I'm a gearhead when it comes to camping and hunting and outdoors and stuff like that. And it's been a really fun thing to be able to put together and even make my own gear for this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
For one, big emphasis on survival kits.
Oh yeah.
I've got a robust survival kit that goes with me whenever I go out in the woods. Yeah. That I know that I can rely on, that it's got, shelter and rain gear and fire starting and a spare knife and water filter and this and that and the other thing. And knowing that I have the gear set that I can rely on, and being confident with at least the pieces of it. I think that's ultimately what it came down to. I know all the pieces of my gear. My biggest mistake is not knowing my gear as a whole.
Well, now, and you learned the hard way.
And that's exactly what I learned the hard way, that, no, this is way too heavy, that this, these pieces won't all work together. If I can't carry it all, it's not going to work together. I put myself in that little bit of a more dangerous situation, taking that day trip out away from camp. I left so much gear in my camp. But I was confident in the minimalist bits that I did have with me, that, look, it might suck to have to hunker down for the night away from camp, but if I really got to, I've got fire making implements, I've got spare flashlights, and I've got that little Mylar survival blanket that will it might keep you warm, but it'll keep you up at night from the noise of the crinkling. So I mean, that's the survival stuff, but some of the gear that I have had the chance to make, it's been really fun to do that actual, kind of medieval stuff. Making all these little belt pouches out of leather scraps has been really great. And there's one piece that I am particularly proud of, and it's my leather and beeswax water bottle.
Yeah, I was about to say, I think it was a couple weeks you were working on when we were playing, just on camera. I would see the you just working on that water bottle, and it's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
It's
so like, I went on my day trip. I carried my various belt pouches and my bow and arrow and a quiver, and then this 3-liter leather water bottle with me. Because I had to go refill water for camp,
right?
And you shouldn't camp that far away from a water source if you're going to be there for a couple days.
No, you absolutely should not.
Definitely having to make an 6 to 8 hour round trip for water is not sustainable.
No.
I've got a list of things I'm working on to improve. The biggest part of that is, learning how to trim down items. I do have a tendency to overpack. I absolutely, in any situation in life, I have a tendency to overpack. Being able to get things down so they're small and light enough to, just attach it to my quiver and be able to move better in the woods without being laden with a large pack.
This time around, I want to see pictures of you in your full gear just walking around your neighborhood. You need to walk over to Will's house and knock on the door and say hi, and then walk back home with all your stuff.
Yeah, there we go.
Maybe throw your tarp or your canvas up in their front yard and just hang out there for a little bit.
No, I mean that is actually a very good idea, because what you don't want to do is put all this stuff together and have not really tested out until you're out there in the woods.
What you don't want to do is what you did last year.
Yeah.
Right. That's awesome. Well, we're pushing time a bit here, but I'm so glad we finally did this. I know we've been talking about it for a little bit, actually talking about our lives outside of D&D, and learning a bit about each other. Because, man, you got great stories. Just amazing. I love it. I love it all. You got a confidence that I just don't have, but all the same interests.
Well, I hope to keep making some more stories.
Oh yeah. I completely believe in you, and hopefully we will see each other again next week as we jump back into our Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, thank you for joining me tonight, and have yourself a good night.
Thanks, Ryan.